Ladies and gentlemen, let's meet the man behind this bio that we've just read out. Please make welcome Professor Dan Chambers.
Thanks very much, Craig and Loretta. Loud crowd, and what a wonderful night. I'm going to tell you guys a story to start with. So 17 years ago, I met a woman named Rose. Without realising it at the time, she would change the course of my professional life. There she is there, with permission. She came to see me at the Prince Charles Hospital with pulmonary fibrosis, a disease where the lungs slowly become scarred. Every breath becomes harder than the last. Now, as a respiratory physician, I'd seen many patients with pulmonary fibrosis before, but something about Rose caught my eye. It wasn't her oxygen tubing, it wasn't her CT scans, it was in fact her eyebrows, believe it or not. They were completely grey, and she had dyed her hair since she was 17 years old. Nothing much in that, you might say, except that Rose, of course, was far too young for that degree of greying. In medicine, sometimes the diagnosis begins not with a laboratory test, but with noticing something that doesn't fit. That observation led us to a mutation in a gene called TERT. At the time, this was still relatively unfamiliar territory, but what we now know is that TERT controls one of the most fundamental systems in human biology, our telomeres. Behind me you can see, hopefully now, a chromosome. At the end of the chromosome sits a tiny protective cap called a telomere. They're a bit like the plastic tips on shoelaces. They start out very long when you're born, but every time one of your cells copies itself to heal a wound, repair your lungs, renew your skin, a tiny fragment of those telomeres is lost. Meaning that inside every one of the trillions of cells in your body sits a molecular clock, ticking right now, quietly counting down biological time. That was a discovery that helped Australian Elizabeth Blackburn win the Nobel Prize in 2009. Coincidentally, exactly the same time I met Rose. When telomeres become critically short, a cell reaches its biological limit. It can no longer repair itself safely. It falls silent, a thing called senescence, or dies. But here's the extraordinary part. We have uncovered a hidden number embedded within human life itself, a biological boundary written into our DNA, a telomere threshold of roughly 1,980 DNA bases. Below that point, the cells simply cannot survive. Of course, the 1980s may mean many things to the people in this room. Queen, Guns N' Roses, AC/DC, Madonna, and of course, the birth of our beloved foundation. But it also appears it means something deeper. Below that threshold, cells fail, which means Douglas Adams may have been wrong. The meaning of life isn't 42, it's actually 1,980. For Rose, that clock was running far too fast. Her mutation meant that her telomeres shortened prematurely. Her lungs aged decades ahead of time. Eventually, she required a lung transplant. That transplant certainly gave her time she otherwise would never have had, but years later, the new lungs also began to scar, and she died. Today, I look after her son. He carries the same mutation, the same biological clock, accelerating silently across generations. Because we still lack effective treatments, he also faces transplantation. For most of human history, ageing has been treated as fate, something inevitable, irreversible. But biology is beginning to tell us a different story. What if ageing, at least in part, is programmable biology? And what if biology can be reprogrammed? What really fascinates me most about this is ageing may not simply be the gradual accumulation of damage. It may be information, a biological program, a set of exquisitely precise, pre-programmed, self-destruct instructions written deep within our cells. At the point we have discovered, those instructions begin telling the cell it's time to stop. But could we go even further? At the Prince Charles Hospital, together with my colleagues John and Glenn from Silicon Valley, and supported by the Prince Charles Hospital Foundation, we are now exploring something I think is extraordinary, whether ageing itself can be biologically reversed. Our approach involves something really remarkable: synthetic messenger RNA carrying instructions for cellular repair. In simple terms, we temporarily give cells instructions to rebuild their telomeres, to restore the protective ends of chromosomes block by block, to make old cells biologically younger again. Our treatment reverses approximately 7 years of ageing in under 24 hours. Not science fiction, not in the distant future, now. As we prepare to enter the clinic, we are already seeing signals that this can reverse hallmarks of cellular ageing. Telomeres lengthen, cells recover, scarring improves. And yes, before you ask, skin loses its wrinkles and hair colour returns. So for the first time, biological clocks begin to move backwards. Think about that for a moment. For all of medical history, medicine has largely fought the consequences of ageing: heart disease, cancer, fibrosis, degeneration. But perhaps for the first time, we are beginning to target ageing itself, not immortality, but restoration, not living forever, but extending healthy, functional human life. More years to breathe deeply, to walk independently, to watch children grow up, to remain connected to the people they love. And perhaps the most extraordinary part of all this is that this work is happening at a relatively small, unassuming hospital in the fairly leafy, northern suburbs of Brisbane, the Prince Charles Hospital, driven by an extraordinary group of clinicians and scientists, who I call friends, supported by this foundation and supported by this community. So what you support tonight is more than research. It is the possibility, the idea, that for the first time in human history, biological time may not just tick in one direction. Thank you so much.